Welcome to Project Duplicity. This is your host, Zachary, speaking, and my co-host, Meyer. Tonight we'll be discussing the Betty and Barney Hill case. This case is very famous. It was one of the first stories about widely spread around. It's one of the first stories about a widely reported UFO abduction in the United States, and that occurred in 1961. So, Meyer, have you heard anything about this case or know anything?
It's not a whole lot of information that I know. Just that it was a pretty crazy abduction story, and there's a lot of information to go over. So I'm excited to kind of get all the details back in my mind. I don't remember too much, but I just remember it's kind of an exciting, very detailed story that seems to have a lot of support, I guess we'll say.
Okay. Yeah, so mainly we'll be discussing tonight, it's like a two-part thing. We'll be discussing the case and discussing what close encounters are. So this case actually happened in New England and New Hampshire around Route 3 during September 19th to September 20th. So here's a little bit of the, so we'll be discussing a lot of different takes on this. We'll be looking at the reports. We'll be looking at, because this was also reported to Project Blue Book, which is a government program that we're looking into UFOs during this time. So it has government involvement, alien abductions, and close encounters. So first, let's go over what close encounters. Meyer, do you know anything about the close encounters? Like any of the takes from 1 to 2, 3, 4, and 5. Do you know any of the close encounters?
I mean, we just went over it, but it's just like different levels of encounters with aliens. I think the first one you said was just like a sighting of a UFO
Yeah.
at a really short distance.
So kind of like what we've had in the previous callers from the last couple episodes, where close encounters are the first and second time, you know. One of the, so we'll go over to the close encounters. So close encounters are the first kind. It's a visual sighting of an unidentified flying object, seeming like about 500 feet away. That shows angular extension and considerable detail. So it's not just like looking up and seeing a star. Okay, it's actually like seeing movement, like, you know, or like an orb, like the orbs that we see a lot of the times in these depictions. Which is one. So close encounters of the second kind is a UFO event which physical effects is alleged. This can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle, electronic devices, animals reacting like they would with a storm, you know, a psychological effect such as paralysis or heat and discomfort in the witness. So like, you know, they're feeling, they're so close to this object that they're feeling the effects from the object, or some physical trace, immersion on the ground, scorched or otherwise affected, like vegetation, to chemical trace, radiation, which was found on remember Deotov pass incident. Remember how like they said that they found traces of radiation, Meyer?
Yeah.
So the stuff that would be considered that would be considered the second kind. Now, close encounters of the third kind is UFO encounters which a animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, or any humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of the UFO, right? And this was Hynek's Hynek's tell.
You good?
Yeah. Oh, I just heard that song, so someone must have said something in chat. I was like looking. Sorry about that. This was Hynek's scale of the close encounters. He only describes 3 close encounters. Later on, Hynek's scale was expanded. So, close encounters of the fourth kind is a close encounter of is a UFO event in which human is abducted by a UFO or its occupant. This type was not included in the original scale, like I just mentioned. Another one that is the close encounters of the fifth kind, which a UFO involvement that involves direct communication between the aliens and the humans. So this case will cover pretty much all these 5 close encounters. You have anything to add to that, Meyer?
No, I think it'd be helpful for someone like me to like maybe have that list in the Discord or something.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll post that in the Discord. Hold on one second. There's the wiki link of what the close encounters would be. All right, so about this case, right? So Betty and Barney, and they around September 19th, 1961, around 10:30 p.m. The Hills were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls in Montreal, right? So just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter, right? Upward to the west of the moon, while Barney's navigating US Route 3. Betty's reasoned that she was observing a falling star, only it moved upward. So that's what made her kind of more weary what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you wouldn't see a shooting star going upward. So since it was moving erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look at, as well to walk their dog. Barney stopped at a scenic picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. So south of Twin Mountain is, if you know the region, is near Lincoln, New Hampshire, which is a ski resort area, right? So it's a very predominant area. Like people go to there during the summer to go swim, or during the winter to go, you know, skiing. So it's a little popular little location. It's mainly just a vacation area to get away from Boston or the cities. Um, so Betty ended up taking binoculars and observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multiple colors. Lights traveled across the face of the moon. Now, she remembers her sister had several years earlier said that she had seen a flying saucer, and Betty thought it might be what she was observing right through the binoculars. Barney observed what he reasoned as a commercial airliner traveling towards Vermont on its way to Montreal. Okay, so he saw a different image. He thought it was, an airliner, where she was thinking that it was something other than just an airliner. So she didn't know. She's going off of her sister's recollection of like what she might have saw. So, he soon so they start traveling a little more down Route 3, and he starts like changing his mind. His observation, like Barney realized, and this is what he says: the object that was a plane was not a plane. So he ends up changing his thought process on that. They quickly returned to the car, right? And drove towards Francona Notch, a narrow mountainous stretch of the road. So this road mainly is like off of like close to Route 3, but it's like more going up like a mountain range. The Hills claim that they continue driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly through Francona Notch in order to observe the object as it came even closer. So they're like, they were being pretty ballsy at this time. They see something that they don't know. He thinks he goes from it's a airliner traveling to commercial airliner traveling to Vermont or Montreal or something to okay, let's get closer. And so Francona Notch is near the Cannon Mountain, near the Old Men on the Mountain, the Old Men of the Mountain, which is a very famous mountain peak. That the mountain peak kind of looks like an old man. So they passed above a restaurant and a signal tower next to the Cannon Mountain and near the Old Mountain of the road. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of a granite cliff profile, which was 40 feet long, and it seemed to be rotating. The couple watched as the silent, illuminating craft moved erratically and bounced back and forth in the night sky. So it was kind of like, remember one of the callers previously mentioning how the aircrafts that they would see would bounce, just go off and back, back and forth.
Yeah.
So approximately 1 mile of Indian Head, they said that the object rapidly descended towards their vehicle. And this caused Barney to stop in the middle of the highway, right? So this huge silent aircraft hovered approximately 80 to 100 feet above the hills. And I will be showing you more like imagery as we go on. The huge silent craft hovered above them, right? So at the time they were driving a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air. So it's a common car that's around during that time. He entered the field of the view in the windshield. It reminded Barney of a huge pancake, right? So like he just noticed it as a huge pancake. So he ends up taking his pistol and carrying his pistol in his pocket. He stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object using the binoculars. Barney claimed that to have seen about 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's window, right? So we'll stop at this point right here so I can show you a little bit. So if you look at your screen, Meyer, if it will let me. So this is a newspaper that ended up being reported about there, but we'll come back to this. This is his figure that he drew. This is Barney right up here, and this is Betty. So this is the imaging that he drew. This is how the aircraft look. And then, so, and here's another one. Here's the illustration. So this is like where they're at there with their 7, and he's looking up with the binoculars at the aircraft. Pretty eerie, right?
Yeah. I mean, if that was that close to me, I'd be shitting.
Remember, this is about 80 to 100 feet above their, Bel Air. So, he notices about 11 humanoid figures. He were peering out of the craft's window, seeming to look at him, right? So, like, if these things are already looking at them, right? So, them just looking at them is very, very odd, dude. One, you don't know what these beings are. 2, this is no airliner, and you wouldn't see this type of thing during 1961. Okay, so all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the highway that encircled the front portion of the craft. So one of them was standing still while the others were moving side to side, moving around in the craft. So, it was allowing them to move around, so these things were definitely observing the Barney and Betty. So like they were looking at Barney and communicating a message telling him to stay. So they end up telling him to stay where you are and keep looking, right? So they're communicating with them. Right there, that's creepy as fuck. Like there's
just like
they tell him this,
or they write him a letter, like
from what I've read, that it was kind of like if it was
like an emotion that they experienced.
It was like telling them through, like, it was kind of like not like a loudspeaker, but like he described it like they were telling him inside of his mind, but at the same time it was vocal. And later on we'll be discussing, because later on they go into hypnosis, and a lot of the encounters that I'm telling you right now is through their hypnosis that they went through to recall a lot of these incidents.
Okay.
Yeah. So the beings tell him a message: stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humans from wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps, right? I will show you an image later on of how these beings looked. Okay.
The Men in Black.
Yeah, kind of. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was about 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him, so about a football lengths away. Barney reported to the investigation committee on aerial phenomenon in October 21st, 1961. Beings were somehow not human, right? So later on, they ended up making a report to the National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomenon, which is part of the group, the Project Blue Book. So Barney ends up running back to his car in a near historical state. He told Betty, they're going to capture us, right? So he's like, they're going to capture us, because the beings started walking out of the UFO and heading towards them. And so almost immediately the Hills heard a rhythmic series of beeping or buzzing sounds, which they said seemed to be bouncing off the trunk of their vehicle. The car vibrated, and a tingling sensation passed through the Hills' body. The Hills said that they experienced the onset of alternate state of consciousness that left their minds dulled. A series of beeping or buzzing sounds returned to the couple, to full consciousness. They found that they traveled nearly 35 miles south, but had only vague, spotty memories of the section of the road. They recalled making a sudden, unplanned turn, encountering a roadblock, and observing a fairy orb in the road. So they, and so that's the last like thing that they remember. Okay, was that they found themselves traveling 35 miles south without any real recollection of it. You know, like their minds kind of like just went on auto mode, kind of, and just traveled. And then they ended up observing the fiery orb in the road. So they end up leaving the scene, going south, and then they get spotted again about that. So, what's your thoughts about this so far?
Well, is there more details to that? Like, were they being chased? Do they not know?
Well, they're definitely were being chased.
Okay, so they're being chased. Their memory's spotty. They hit a roadblock, and there's just like another orb that's in the picture.
Um, I'll show you another one right here. So here is, this is an actual drawing from Barney, right? And it's actually in public records. So you can actually go and check this out, like in a museum near this area. So this is how it looked when it was about 200 feet high, right? And then this is how it looked when it was about 100 feet over the field. So it had an extension of like red light on the end with a fin, right? And so this is his drawing of it. We'll come to that later. All right. So they observe it up in the field. This guy gets out of his car with the pistol, with his binoculars, you know, checking it out in the field while they're walking their dog, right? They notice that the object's getting closer. They telepathically say something to him or said something out. It's very vague on it because if I could, we could listen to their testimony, but it's copyrighted, so we can't be able to use it. Or later on, you can join the Discord and you can click on this. I will have links so you can listen to the testimony yourself. And the recordings of their hypnosis during this time. All right, so this is pretty much like what happened after this, right? So after they drive 35 miles, so this is what happened the next day, right? So when they arrived at home about at dawn, the hills assert that they had some odd sensation and impulses that they could not readily explain. Betty insisted that their luggage. She told Barney, "We're keeping our luggage right outside the house, the main part of the house." One, their watches would not work, right? So remember, when we go back into thinking about close encounters, right? Mm-hmm. The second close encounter is when electronics or vehicles stop working properly. So remember, their watches aren't working. Okay, so that's close encounter the second time, right? They communicated. So
a new battery, man. They bought them at the same time. What do you mean?
So their watches are don't work at this time. Barney said that the leather strap of the binoculars were torn, right? Though he could not recall it tearing. So the binoculars that he used, the strap is torn. The toes of his best dress shoes were scraped. Barney says that he was compelled to, when he took a shower, to examine his body. Okay, he didn't find anything unusual. Each person drew so Betty and Barney both drew pictures of what they observed in the sky, and both of them drew similar pictures. This was Betty's drawing, and that's Barney's drawing. So they both had very similar drawings.
Pretty much.
So the Hill said that they tried to reconstruct the chronological order of the events as they witnessed the UFO and drove home, but immediately after they heard buzzing sounds in their memories, it became incomplete and fragmented. So it's like they started hearing like a kind of like if you had a concussion, right? So it's like they're in the middle of like having a concussion, not being able to recollect what's going on. So after sleeping for like a few hours, Betty awoke and placed the shoes and clothes she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining of the dress. So her dress was ripped right up on the top right corner. I will show an image of that particular dress. Later, when she retrieved the items from her closet, she noticed a pinkish powder on her dress. But the dress was irreparable. She threw it away, but then she changed her mind and pulled it out of the trash can, right? Because she like wanted to know what that substance was, right? Like what that pink powder that was on her dress, what it was. And later on, this dress will be very important. So they're when they went outside and they like started observing their vehicle, right? And they started noticing that a shiny concrete circles on their car trunks that had not been there previous day were there. So it's like if it had like it's like if something went over it with like a sharp edge or something, like, so, you know, some force or anything like was scraping against the car, you know. So it had like a shiny concrete circles on it. So it's like if the aircraft was damaged the vehicle, right? So this is what happened in the morning of their incident. They were and dazed and confused, you know, didn't know what occurred. They were kind of like just in awe, you know, just didn't know what was going on. So this happened the September 19th and September 20th. Okay. So on the 21st, Betty telephoned PZ Air Force Base to report their UFO encounter. Though for fear of being labeled eccentric, she withheld some of the details. On September 22nd, Major Paul D. Henderson telephoned the Hills for a more detailed interview. Henderson reported on September 26th, determined that the Hills had properly misidentified the planet Jupiter. This was later changed to optical contusion, inversion, and insufficient data. Report 101-161 Air Force Intelligence Information Record. His report was forwarded to Project Blue Book, the United States Air Force UFO research project. Project Blue Book, you won't do you know anything about that, Meyer?
I think it might have came up, but I don't remember.
Okay, so Project Blue Book was one of the series of systematic studies of unidentified flying objects conducted by the United States Air Force. It started in 1952, the third study of its kind, following Project Sign 1947 and Grudge of 1949. So, you know, it dates back in 1952, but a lot of their case studies go even further than that. Within days of the encounter, Betty borrowed a UFO book from like the so she wanted to know more about like unidentified flying objects. So she ends up finding a retired Marine Corps Major Donald E. Kehoe, who was also head of the NICAP, right, which was a civilian UFO research group. This major was also part of Project Blue Book. But when he retired, he started his own joined up with the civilian UFO research group. Betty wrote to Kehoe. She related the full story, including the details about the human figures that Barney had observed through binoculars. Betty wrote that she and Barney were considering like hypnosis to help recall what had happened. Her letter was eventually passed on to Walter N. Webb, a Boston astronomer and a NICAP member. So her story is getting out there, going from one. And Barney at this time was more, let's just put it this way, he kind of didn't want any, like he was afraid of what was coming out. You know what I mean? Because during this time, you got to know that, you know, racial tension was very high, and he's an African American male, married to a white woman. So at that time, it was negative on both their ends. So Webb met with the Hills on October 21st, 1961, and in a 6-hour interview that they conducted, the Hills related all they could remember of the UFO encounter. Barney asserted that he had developed a sort of a mental block that he suppressed. Okay. Don't have that on right now, so I'm gonna have to give you those points, Meyer. Back. I gotta take that off. He that's like what he's been doing. So Betty's been more of the one that's like trying to find out what happened to them, right? Where Barney created this mental block, he did not wish to remember any of what recalled, like what happened to him. He didn't want any answers. He was actually kind of this put like some strain on their marriage, because he wanted to move on, like if nothing happened, but Betty was always pressing to just keep on going and trying to figure out what occurred that night. So Webb stated that there were he stated that from all what he can notice, that he believed them. Webb stated that they were telling the truth, and that the incident probably occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties, and that must be tolerated in such observation where human judgment is involved. So like the exact time and the length of visibility. So some of it, he was saying that they could have gotten the observation of like the distance of the craft, maybe a little, like, you know, the technicalities were a little off, but he believed their full encounter. So what do you think so far, Meyer, about the case?
They're split as a couple about whether or not they want to really even talk about it, which is kind of bizarre. I mean, I kind of understand the reasoning that you mentioned, but I don't know. I guess I just want to hear more at this point.
Okay. So 10 days after the alleged UFO encounter, right, Betty began having serious and vivid dreams that started recalling like what she witnessed. They continued for five nights in a row. Never in her memory had she recalled dreams in such detailed and intensity, but they stopped abruptly after 5 nights and never returned. They occupied her thoughts during the day. When she mentioned them to Barney, he was sympathetic but not too concerned, and then the matter was dropped. Betty did not mention them again to Barney. So Barney was kind of more about reinforcing that mental block, right?
Yeah.
So in November
Kind of
night,
sweeping it, like under the rug. Sense.
what's that? Sorry.
He's like sweeping under the rug, really.
Yeah, like he does not want to remember this, so it must have been so shocking to him, where he does not want to have any recollection of it, doesn't want to remember anything, wants to move on. So in November of 96, Betty Gibbon began writing down the details of her dreams. In one dream, she and Barney encountered a roadblock and men who surrounded their car, right? So remember how, like, the last thing that they remember was the roadblock? Remember, they drove for, not remember driving 35 miles south, hitting a roadblock, right? So in her dream, she remembers the roadblock, and also not only that, but men who surrounded their car. She lost consciousness but struggled to regain it. Then she realized that she was being forced by two small men to walk in a forest at night, and of seeing Barney walking behind her through what she called to him as he seemed to be in a trance or sleepwalking. The men stood about 5 feet to 5 feet 4 inches tall and wore matching blue uniforms with caps similar to those worn by military cadets. They appeared nearly human with black hair, dark eyes, prominent noses, and blushed lips. Their skin was grayish color. So remember, this is very interesting. Around this same time, right, 2 years before, remember that caller that we had talking about black hair?
Yeah.
Remember Bren?
Yep.
Talking about that
I was just thinking about that.
same appearance. Not grayish, but remember, at night, green skin could seem grayish, right?
Absolutely.
And remember, she said, did she mention, I can't recall, did she mention anything about clothing on them? I just remember the black hair and them being small.
Small. She liked saying green for sure, but I feel like she said something about clothes, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. So, I'm going to show you a picture here. We're going to skip over some of it. This is what she saw. This is the image that she had illustrated for.
Looks like a Ninja Turtle.
Well, yeah, but this is kind of what she said. Grayish skin, the nose, the eyes. Very creepy looking.
Yeah.
So, what's that?
Kind of looks aggressive as well.
Yeah. Okay. Clementry said that she didn't mention anything. That Bren didn't mention anything about clothing. All right. Thank you for that, Clementry. Only hair. Okay. In the dreams, Betty, Barney, and the men walked up a ramp into a disc-shaped craft of metallic appearance. Once inside, Barney and Betty were separated. So they separated Barney and Betty. She protested and was told by men she called the leader that if she and Barney were examined together, it would take much longer to conduct the examinations. She and Barney were then taken to separate rooms. Okay, so they're examining them. Whatever that examination is, it's very creepy, dude, that they separated them, and they're talking to them. Betty then dreamt that a new man, similar to the others, entered to conduct her exam with the leader. Betty called this new man the examiner and said that he had a pleasant, calm manner, though the leader and the examiner spoke to her in English. The examiner's command of language seemed imperfect, and she had difficulty understanding. So, broken English, it seems like they can conduct some English, but not all the way, right?
Yeah.
The examiner told Betty that he would conduct a few tests to note that the differences between humans and the craft's occupants. He seated her on a chair and had a bright light, which shined on her. The man cut off cut off a lock of Betty's hair. He examined her eyes, ears, mouth, teeth, throat, and hands. He saved trimmings from her fingernails. After examining her legs and feet, the man used a dull knife similar to a letter opener to scrape off some of her skin onto a resembled a cellophane. He then tested her nervous system, and he thrusted the needle into her navel, right? Which caused Betty initially a lot of pain. Whereupon the leader waved his hand in front of her eyes, and the pain vanished.
What?
Yeah. The examiner left the room, and Betty engaged in conversation with the leader. She picked up a book with rows of strange symbols. The leader said she could take home with her. She also asked where he came from, and he pulled down an instructional map dotted with stars. Now, Betty said that this star map, right, was more of like a holographic, she said that it was like a 3D projection, which in today we would consider like maybe a hologram, right?
Yeah.
So I will show you the star map that this is the star map that she drew, right? And the star map at the time was not even known, right? When she drew this, they said that this map did not even exist. Like, this coordinates of stars did not exist at all.
Now.
Yeah, we'll be getting back to this, and I will be showing you. So Betty's account, like the recollection that she had, the men began escorting the hills from the ship. When a disagreement broke out, the leader then informed Betty that she couldn't keep the book, stating that they had decided that the other men did not want her to even remember the encounter. Betty insisted that no matter what they did to her memory, she would one day recall the events. She and Barney were taken to their car, where the leader suggested that they wait to watch the craft departure. They did so and then resumed their drive. So
like this whole recollection that you've just been saying, is that from her dreams that she's been having then, or?
Yeah, this was all from her dreams that she's been writing down in her journal. Betty, in the examination room, the leader, Clementry, pulled down a star map that she like said that was like a 3D projection. Like, so if it was, he lowered a projection of the star map that she ended up drawing. So now, like, they ended up getting medical help and had more interviews, and the medical help was more of the hypnosis. So they end up seeing a psychiatrist, Simon, to have the hypnosis sessions, right? So Barney's session, Simon hypnotized Barney first. His recall of the witnessing non-human figures was quite emotional. So when he was hypnosed, Barney was had tears running down his face. He was emotionally outburst, and Barney said that due to his fear, he kept his eyes closed for much of the abduction and physical examination. Based on the earlier response, Simon told Barney that he would not remember the hypnosis session until he was certain he could remember them without being further traumatized. So Simon, that was conducting the hypnosis, he did rigorously like he did multiple hypnosis on Barney, because he would have to stop the hypnosis because he would go in like extreme frantic, being terrified. Like he would actually one of the notes that Simon made was that, and these were all published, like this ended up Barney and Betty later on ended up allowing this to be known, right? But in one of the notes, Simon wrote that Barney, during the hypnosis, crawled in a ball and went into the corner crying and screaming, telling the people that abducted him to stop, and that he just wanted to go home. So he had a mental breakdown several times under hypnosis. Barney also reported that the binocular strap had broken when he ran from the UFO back to the car. In the hypnosis, he recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but that afterwards he felt compelled to pull off the road and drive into the woods. He eventually saw 6 men standing in the dirt road that they pulled off into, right? The car stalled and 3 of the men approached the car. They told Barney not to fear them. He was still anxious, however, and he reported that the leader told Barney to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, "I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes." Right?
What?
Yeah, like they're kind of like if like their eyes pushed into his eyes, like kind of like their presence. I would assume like kind of like their presence was overwhelming.
Kind of like when you fall in love with your wife and you look into their eyes, like that maybe.
Kind of like that, but in more of that they were more inferior beings. That
Yeah.
Barney and Betty were more inferior than these beings. And so it's kind of like when someone with more power is above you, you kind of like collapse and just like you have no choice.
Yeah. Okay. Good explanation.
Yeah. Barney described that the beings as generally similar to Betty's hypnotic, but not dream recollection. Right. The beings often stared into his eyes, said Barney, with a terrifying, mesmerizing effect. Under hypnosis, Barney said things like, "Oh, those eyes! There's something in my brain." From his first hypnosis, kind of like that these beings were. Seems like they were manipulating them through whatever, telepathically manipulating these these 2 beings, you know what I mean, that these beings were telepathically and even technically just more superior than them through technology, through everything, right? So I was told to close my eyes because I saw 2 eyes coming close to mine, and I felt like these eyes had pushed into mine. We just discussed that. Then I'm just kind of going off of like what he discussed in the first hypnotic interview. He's all I see are all these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just so up close to me, pressing against my eyes. And so that's like some of the things that he was saying during the recording. And I wish that you could listen to the recording, because the recording, when you hear him screaming, it's very terrifying. Like it's something that you would not be able to rehearse and you know what I mean. It doesn't seem like it was an acting job or anything. You know what I mean? Like these people were acting. Like these people believe what they saw, like truly believed it.
Here's what I don't get. You
Uh,
know how like they took Betty's pain away just like that?
yeah.
Why wouldn't they just remove his fear then? You know what I mean? Like there's a little discrepancy there that's bothering me.
Well, I would.
Like
Well,
her experience seems pretty casual, like a trip to the doctor's office almost, and he's like, you know, the normal
well,
reaction is to
okay. So remember the pain that the leader took away from Betty was
yeah.
more of a pain from the naval shot, right? That they stuck in her nose. Yeah, Meyer, your mic's a little
Staticky.
it's a little staticky.
Yeah, one sec.
No, it's not supposed to sound like an alien. I think Meyer's trying to fix it.
Yeah, I'm supposed to sound like an alien. That's the goal. Navel as in belly button, I believe.
Yeah, sorry, naval. Um, yeah, so you know, the leader took away the pain during that occurrence. But if you think about it, Meyer, it's more she was less afraid, it seems, where Barney was more afraid. So even if they were treating him with the way that Betty recalls, if you're already afraid of the unknown, you're not going to have a pleasant time like maybe Betty. You know what I mean? Or less. Well, I wouldn't say a pleasant time, but you know what I mean.
Well, what
Less.
I'm insinuating is like she was pretty much just mind controlled the whole time. So like, why was he so afraid if she wasn't like? There's no
Well,
way in hell
maybe she was.
wasn't afraid
Okay,
normally.
maybe he was. All right. So one thing too is, um, maybe he had a higher resistance from their control. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
he was a high, not, maybe he had a higher IQ than Betty. Not saying anything about that, but maybe he was not as much of in a trance. Maybe Betty was more in a trance because it was her way of coping with the distress, right? So she made it seem like more of a doctor's visit, where Barney has been trying to suppress this from the very get-go, right? And didn't want to remember any of it because it was so traumatic to him. And during the tape session, Betty.
I mean, do you believe in hypnosis?
Yeah, I believe in hypnosis. I mean, like, there's been studies on it, and I believe that you can be, you know, psychiatrists sometimes use it to try to unravel some of the things that you're suppressing, right?
To be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I I think that it could be possible. I think that it could work.
They were paid off, Yoris. Come on.
So let me see, where were we? So unlike Betty, Barney you know, kept his eyes closed through most of the examination. He also recalled a cup-like device was placed over his genitals. He did not experience any sensation. Like, he was flat out just totally. He ended up just allowing them to do what they like wanted, but was just totally shut out after that. Once they like pretty much examined him and started taking his clothing and samples from his body, he kind of shut out after that. Like, he avoided all thought process dealing with them. And so that's where a lot of his testimony, like from his first 2 sessions of the hypnosis, kind of ends. Now, Betty, on the other hand, reported a conversation with the leader that She understood in English. Barney said that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language he did not understand. Yet he also understood them in English. Betty also mentioned these details. So they both are mentioning that they had English, but at the same time also had a mumbling, like a language that like. And so Barney said it would seem to be thought transference. At the time, he was unfamiliar with the word telepath. You know what I mean? That so it's like they were just transferring, like so, transferring their language into English in a way. Both Betty and Barney stated that they haven't observed these beings' mouths moving when they communicated in English with them. So
some sort of telepathic or something.
yeah, he recalled the beings escorting from the ship and taken to his car. In a daze, he watched the ship leave. Barney resembled a light appearing on the road. As he said, "Oh no, not again." He recalled Betty's that the light might have been from the moon through. He also stated that he attempted to produce the code light buzzing sound, which seemed to strike the car's trunk a second time by driving from side to side and stopping and starting the vehicle. And his attempts were unsuccessful. So he was trying to mimic that buzzing sound again that kind of put him in that trance in the first place. And then, so that was Barney's hypnosis session. Okay. So far, what do you think? Next one we'll be talking is about Betty's session.
I just think it's bizarre, but you made some good points about how people handle high stress situations differently. So I mean, there's some possible validity to that. And like burying it, I mean, I've talked to people that have gone through some pretty dark things, and just like a complete blackout is like something that does happen. But
Yeah.
as far as hypnosis, I mean, I haven't been convinced. I'm more likely to believe in aliens than that, to be honest. But I don't know. I guess I just haven't experienced it myself, so maybe that's part of that. But regardless, I mean, I'm still kind of like hung up on the fact that she was all like good, and then he was just freaking out. Like you'd think if they had the ability to just remove her pain, they could have probably just like done
Yeah, but what
something
if the removing a pain wasn't really removing a pain? It was more of her trying to cope with what she was. You know what I mean? Like she was already regressing so much at the time. So like from the first encounter all the way to the end, she regressed her fear into trying to make it into a positive, right? So her natural
But you said they like shoved a knife into her navel, essentially.
well, a shot, like some type of like soft tissue, like she said it was like not as sharp it was like a paper opener, like, but it was into her navel.
Do you know how excruciating that is? Like you wouldn't be able to ignore that.
That's why I think that she already regressed so much of just seeing from the object from the first get-go all the way to the very end, where that was her defense mechanism of making it seem less than what it was. You know what I mean?
I get where you're coming from, but I just can't
Yeah, and who knows?
say
Like,
that makes
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Well, and that we just went through Barney's session, right? So here's Betty's session. So under hypnosis, Betty's account was very similar to her 5 dreams about the UFO abduction, which with some notable differences, mainly pertaining to her capture and release. Also, the technology on the craft was different. The short men differed significantly in the physical appearance, and the sequencing order of the abduction was different as well. Barney's in better. It's a little better, Meyer, but it's kind of a little bit of static here and there. So Barney's and Betty's memories and the hypnotic regression were, however, consistent with one another. Right. So that's just. So this is what Betty's exemption considerable emotional distress when recording her. You want me to hold up, Meyer?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Um, recounting her capture and examination. Simon ended one session early because she was also having tears were flowing down her cheeks, and she was laying down for this hypnosis. And from Simon's recall, so just imagine your body. So here, can you see the you can see my hand right here, right, Meyer, in the camera? So her body, when her body would pop up. So her feet would be on the ground and her head would be, and her body would pop up, like making an upside down V. So her body was having a lot of impulse when she was in hypnosis, and crying at the same time. You want to hold on, Meyer, while you fix your mic, or were you able to listen to that, or
What?
were you able to kind of see what I'm like talking about? Like so when she was under hypnosis, her body was going parallel, right, like in a flat position, all the way into like a upside down V. So her feet. So she was having impulses like that, and that's what the psychiatrist was noting, that like it was so dramatic for Betty to go through this hypnosis that she would be crying and her body would be going from a flat position to a V, just popping up. And so he would have to stop the session multiple times so that she wouldn't be going through those grievances. Simon gave Betty the post hypnotic suggestion that she could sketch out a copy of this. So he ends up stopping one of the sessions when she talks about the star map, and so this is the star map that she drew during the session. When she drew the map, she saw many stars, but she drew only those that stood out in her memory. She said that it was three-dimensional projection, similar to a hologram. When she drew her map consisted of 12 prominent stars connected by lines. And so she said that these lines were trade routes.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
So where the dashes, so if you look right here, if you look at these are like the two stars, the two major stars. And so these like heavy lines, let me see. I want to make sure that I got this down correctly. So the solid lines, right? The solid lines were their trade routes, right? And
Are
then
the two big ones at the bottom planets, or like?
this is two different Jovian planets, I believe. We'll look at the actual star map of this, because remember this wasn't discovered at the time of when this was investigated. And then these little dotted lines, I know that you can't really see, were the less traveled lines. And this is what she kind of perceived. So in Simon's conclusion, that the psychiatrist that was doing the hypnosis, he speculated that Barney's recollection of the UFO encounter was true, but at the same time also might have been inspired by some of Betty's dreams. Simon was he was kind of more he believed Barney, but at the same time he was more reluctant to believe some of the encounters about Barney, because he was afraid that he took some of the influence from Betty's story. the part that Simon believes about Barney's was the examination, the beings. So he believes 70% of Barney's tale, but 30% he still was very iffy about because of maybe Betty's influence about the dreams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but then so after the sessions and Barney listening to him after the recording, Barney actually ended up accepting that that they had been abducted by occupants of the UFO. He never really embraced it as fully as Betty did, though the Hills and Simon about some of the hypnosis sessions, mainly about how the Barney take of it. You know what I mean? So they were very skeptical about Simon was very skeptical about Barney's take on it. And Barney ended up, thinking that it was he ended up believing that he wasn't influenced by Betty's dreams, because he ended up later coming out that he didn't even know. Remember how Betty stopped, telling him about the dreams, right?
Yeah, it was the 5 days, and then she stopped talking about it. So
Yeah.
it must have continued then.
Yeah. So if you go to this certain museum, it has her dress, it has the diaries, the writing. You can also listen to the sessions during that too. So the series of hypnosis were complete. Simon wrote an article about the Hills for the psychiatric opinion, explaining his conclusion that the case was a singular psychological. So he didn't like. So Simon was more. He believed that what they believed, but said that it was more that they were psychologically that it could have been something totally different, and that they were adding these unknown figures and UFOs as a way to hide what they truly saw. You know what I'm saying? So
Which would be what?
He doesn't. He just says that they were just trying to cover up something that might have happened out there. Whether it might have been,
You're telling me he thinks that there's something crazier than all this?
well, not something that's crazier, but that it could have been, let's just say, people, the other human beings being nasty to them. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
That he doesn't believe that it was UFOs. He thinks that what they experienced was real, but that it wasn't no aliens, that it wasn't no UFO. Remember this during this time, like this type of thinking was outlandish,
Yeah.
So like after the hypnosis they ended up being publicized a lot more, right? So they ended up an article comes out about it. It goes to the Boston Traveler in 1965. So this article right here was published in 1965. Called the UFO Chiller, right? Just explaining everything. So this is like a little thing. With this, a little bit of the story, what occurred. So their sessions that they had ended up being leaked over to the Boston Traveler. So the Boston Traveler also was alleged that were given the audio tapes of the recording of the lectures. Now will be, so after all that you've heard, what do you think? So this is everything to dealing with the case so far.
Like, do I think it was actually aliens or something else? Is that what you're asking?
Well, what do you think so far? Like, I mean, Clementry also brings up a point that interracial couple, they could have been terrorized by people, and that she could have ended up being raped by people, right? And that he was abused and naked, and you know what I mean. You know, that is a possibility, and that's what the psychiatrist was thinking. Okay, for better or less words, you know what I mean. Like, he believed that they went through some traumatic distress, that there were people involved, and it is the south of the north up there. I mean, like, you're gonna get people that are gonna be very tolerant and very open-minded up there, or you're just gonna get like the backwoods, you know, racist, you know, bigotry up there. So this is her dress that's in the museum. So this is the part that was ripped out right here. Okay. And they did examination over the dress, and they did end up finding substance that was unknown to this planet. And you can, if you go to this particular museum, you can, it's it's located around that area.
So you're telling me the elements composed of that material we don't know about?
But yeah, it was unknown. It's an unknown substance. The pink powder that she talks about.
Yeah.
So this was like, so right up here, you see how like more, you see the silk that was ripped, but it was still attached, and they took that that sample and they had it run through labs,
And nothing.
and they could not. They found that there was an unknown substance that was drenched in that cloth. So this is the
Well, that's all we know. It's just an unknown substance. That's
unknown substance. They don't know what it was or where it could have been, but it was nothing that you would be able to find on this on the planet at that time.
Okay, what about now?
They never removed the. It's still in the museum. They haven't really done any other testing over the substance that I know of.
Bullshit. You're telling me this is not from this earth? We're not gonna try to figure that out? That's sus.
Yeah, it might be sus, but I'm just going off of what they have. Because in 2011, or actually, hold up. Yeah, so 2009 and 2011, this is the star map that they ended up finding and publishing. And these are, so here's what she drew, right? And this is the star map that they astronomers ended up finding to prove. Yeah. So the unknown substance is a compound that slash chemical that we as people don't know about. So well, the last time that I read on the whole substance was the last time that they opened up with the case was in between 2009 and 2011, and because they took her star map and astronomers started looking for the particular area, and so this is what they ended up finding in the area, which they believe resembles Betty's drawing.
So are these stars or planets or both for that?
So this Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 are these are all stars, right?
Okay.
And so the astronomers end up finding out that each star is gravity bound by that have planetary systems. More Jovian planets, they couldn't really find any terrestrial planets. So It could be like if they lived on Titan, for instance, right around the Jupiter moons. One of the stars, um, Alpha been saying was had Jovian planets around it as well, and so um, most of them were just big Jovian planets that were around them. So
What does Jovian mean?
Jovian is gas planet. So like
Okay.
so mainly like anything that's past the terrestrial wall. So anything that's so anything beyond the warming of planets, right? So like Mars is the last one, right? So after Mars, it's going to be, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, so on and so forth, that they're not warm enough to be, solid planets. But they could have moons that can possibly have, terrestrial, like planet type of atmospheres and gravity, kind of like Titan would be, Europa would be another one, that can be heated up by the Jovian planet, and that can be, have the beings live, people being, living on there, and then
So is Sol our sun or not?
what's that?
SOL.
SOL. What do you mean? Sorry. Oh,
On the star
Sol.
map, is it?
Oh yeah,
Isn't it our sun?
these are all stars. So these are
But Sol is our sun, isn't it?
yeah. So this is like a sun right here. Yeah, so Sol is a sun. And all these are different types of like Jovian planets. And I believe Zeta 2 and Zeta 1 were let me see. Zeta 1.
All right, Ordelis, goddamn. That's kind of where I was going with that, though. Is like, relatively speaking, galaxy-wise, like this seems kind of close.
Um I believe this star system is 39.5 light years away. So it's pretty far. Yeah. Let's see. Hold up, I got my footnotes right here.
Tesla will get us there.
Okay, my bad. It's 39.3 light years away. 12.0 parsecs from Earth. So it's fucking far, dude. Very far from there. They says both stars are solar analogs. So it's a 2-star system. So they have twin suns.
Hmm.
Kind of like Tatooine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far this is like the star map that she drew, and see that like what's going to be interesting about this particular star map is we're going to have other cases that are a little after this that have this particular same star map. So there's a famous case that happened in Arizona of the mid to late, I believe it was mid 1970s, the Travis Walton case. His experience, they ended up having the same he ends up seeing the same map from the beings that he saw inside the aircraft. So that's what we're going to be discussing next week. So far, what do you like? So this is everything to do with the case of the Betty and Barney case. And so what's your over thought?
I don't know, man. I mean, this one's kind of, after actually hearing everything, like I don't know, the curveball of like the psychiatrist saying like this could have just never happened, and it was just like a traumatic experience that they came up with all this stuff. I mean, that seems like a little bit of a stretch to me, but
Yeah.
I don't know. As far as the encounter itself, like I'm still hung up on how the fact that like they could just remove her pain, and whether or not that's actually what happened. I mean, we don't know, but for him to just be so like, I guess, worked up over it, and then for her to be able to just like go through it like that, that's kind of weird, I guess, or it makes me
Yeah.
kind of question the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
there's just not as many like concrete details here and evidence.
well, yeah, one, you're going off of testimony, right?
Right. That's pretty much all we got.
Two, you're going off of, um, they did report it to Project Blue Book, right? And other people
Yeah.
did investigate it at that time, and they believed their encounters, right? Um, so a lot of it is going off of faith that what they really like use. Now, the tangible proof that we do have is the dress with the unknown substance. Um, some
Well,
of
that's
the
another thing for me, man. The unknown
some of the,
substance.
yeah. Well, I mean, like if you went up to New Hampshire, you could be able to go and actually go and see it, and you can see everything that they have about it, and the people that did the research are like actually because the dress that they ended up sending off for testing was conducted in one of the universities in Boston. So I've been to the museum there. It's one of my because I knew about this case when I was a little kid, and so when I went up to that section, I ended up checking it out and all that stuff, and it's pretty crazy, dude. Like how they have her clothing, they have Barney's scuffed up shoes, so it was pretty interesting. And Dallas, if you look at the star map, everything in solid lines is there. What she perceived them as trade routes because it was more distinguished, right? And the dotted line, she thought that those were less traveled areas. So that's how she perceived the map to be when she was showing the map, that these were trade routes.
How
Clementrice,
weird would it be if they collected our DNA and were like putting our species on other planets? Because essentially, that's what they said they were doing, is collecting skin cells and other DNA that
yeah, like
maybe we
scraping
could
of the
go into.
skin, fingernails. I remember while Mara and I discussed this, what we think about the case. If any of you guys that are watching, feel free to join the Discord channel. Go, you can join. Go to one of the waiting rooms, and if you can, tell us what you think personally about this case, or what you think in general about extraterrestrial abductions, UFOs, so on and so forth. Just go to one of the waiting rooms. We'll be more than happy to be taking callers at this time. But yeah, this one case, it really got me thinking a lot about. This was one of the first things when I was really interested as a child about UFOs and stuff. This was the first case that always popped up. You know what I mean? That my parents told me about this case of from the newspapers and followed along. So it's very interesting.
So, do you think that it actually happened how they said it did?
I think that it happened. I think that Betty was more not accepting, but she regressed her memory into a way that it seemed less painful than it was. And for her body to convulse and from a flat position to an upward V, like if her body just like lifted up and jolted up, means that she was feeling some type of pain if you don't believe that it was extraterrestrials doing that to her, then something significant did that. And I believe what they saw, you know, I guess just from like good faith, but at the same time, like this star map was not known at that time. And people in the 60s debunked it, said that it didn't exist, and then they kept on searching, and then they ended up finding it, and then they did more research on it. So she drew this up without even, you know, knowing that it existed, right? So that's pretty odd right there. How did she just drew something that's identical to it? You know, that's another thing too. That's I guess that's one of the evidences that we have, right? Tangible evidence from memory, I guess, if you want to take it as that, right? Because this is what she drew during the session. And so astronomers took that, and this is what they came up with, you know, that was very identical to the drawing. So I guess you could take that as evidence. But I honestly, I think that they went through that. What do you think?
For me, like the substance from a chemistry standpoint, if everything's made up of atoms, how have we not figured out what that is, or found out, okay, this is a new element or elements? You know what I mean? To just leave that as an unknown substance, that's not like our society at all. First of all,
Well, it could still be
and this
unknown
was a
because it could have
long
been
time ago.
contaminated, or the properties broke down over time when they did the testing, that it just showed up as unknown. Because properties can break down where it has no element to it left. You know what I'm
Not to nothing though.
Well, it's like, you know, if everything breaks down, it's not gonna hold. You won't know what it is. I guess you can keep on doing. I guess you could, but who's gonna be paying a lot of money to keep on doing that? You know what I mean?
Well, what I'm saying though is they could have easily taken that under a microscope, even at that time, and recorded the amount of protons, neutrons, all that stuff, and still have figured it out by now.
Yeah. Well, people that did the research on that, it was just a case study. It was a bunch of it was just pretty much like people that wanted to do the testing, you know, that was part of like the university took it, but mainly they just came up that it was unknown substance. So, and that's, no one else from then has repeated the same testing. So I guess if we can come up with funds, then we can fund it. You know what I mean? But everything costs money, so mainly people leave it as either people aren't going to spend a lot of money to do this type of search that don't believe in this, believe that extraterrestrials abducted them. They'll think that they're just wasting a lot of time and money. You know what I mean?
I guess. I don't know, man.
But what do you think about the star map, though?
That is interesting, but I'm not sure how, like, constellations. I'm not saying that this is a constellation because you're saying she's suggesting it's trade routes, but like, couldn't you just, draw lines between stars that look like it would fit and leave out the rest and make it look the same?
Yeah, but even drawing out the stars, particularly the stars, and how she had enough recollection to even draw the bigger stars than the smaller ones.
Yeah, but if you think about how big the galaxy is, or, even the universe as a whole, I mean, there could be multiple.
But that lines up practically like identical to her map.
Well, there's so many dots in the sky. You're just
Yeah, but I could draw a bunch
of.
of stars, and she drew which ones were bigger to smaller, right? And the distance between each one. A pretty vivid drawing. We could take a look at it. Like I would say that's pretty good. Right there.
Well, are they bigger or is it distance? Like that's the other thing. There's
Well,
no
there's
like scale.
well, there's no scale between the distance, but the way that she's drawing it from the astronomers, No, I'm using PowerPoint, dude. I can't overlay them. I guess I could too. Hold up, I'll do side by
No,
side.
what I'm saying is like just because she drew it bigger doesn't mean it necessarily
Oh,
is bigger.
hold up, I'll do a
It
side by
could be
side.
closer to us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, hold up.
Like whatever's on the paper doesn't really just because the one paper may be bigger than the other. That doesn't really do anything for anybody.
All right, let's see. Did that kind of help you out right there, side by side? Like reference?
So she had like 6 other stars there. Where are they?
Yeah, but I mean, like, look at the main points. You got this one. These two match up to these two. This one matches up to that one. That one to Soul. This one over here. Then you got these. That one to that one. So she has these main ones down pretty good. And then
All I'm saying
she has
is
these
you look
three.
up in the sky, there's
Yeah.
so many dots there that, not everything is on these pictures, first of all. And second of all, there's just so many possibilities for, us to just find a match that it doesn't necessarily mean anything to me at least.
Yeah. So um so her map hints at heavy traffic to our system. That's strange. Well, it kind of, I guess, like it would kind of make sense if they're visiting us a lot, which the past episodes that we've had were around the same time frame, um, with a lot of um, visiting UFO encounters, right? So well, Phoenix Lights were in the 90s, but um, the Dayatov Pass was actually 2 years before this incident. So there's in my it can be multiple different possibilities. I guess like you could draw out any type of map, right? Um, but this is very, just looking at the line pattern, it's very distinctive on it. Pretty pretty spot on. Even if you're missing these 6 down here.
I don't know. It's just not enough for me, man.
Yeah. So what do you think of their like overall encounter with the aircraft?
I think it's a good story, but that's about it. I don't. There's not enough evidence here to suggest anything really, and like even the suggestion of it
Okay.
being just a traumatic incident from possibly racist people. I mean, just because a shirt's torn. I mean, I don't know. This is not enough for me.
Yeah. So this plaque right here, you can see it. It's along Route 3. It's near Lincoln. They made it an official monument in 2000, a historical monument in 2011. After they conducted the star map. So after the star map, they ended up doing that, like verifying her star map. And so astronomers able to verify what she drew is pretty good evidence for me. But I can tell that you're more skeptical about it than
Well,
anything.
and if I knew more about like astronomy as a whole, maybe it would be more of a
Yeah. And that's kind of like the thing that, like, that's, we don't have like all the time in the world to just discuss all the astronomy and like the distance, but
right.
they were traveling here. They have us on the trading route, right? Um, or like their routes, right? Their heavy routes. So they're going from place to place. And so on the star map, right? So on this star map, she heavily drew that they were traveling from Zeta 1 to Zeta 2 heavily. And that they would travel over to Seoul, right? And come back down. And well, all right. And then so they were traveling quite a while, are traveling very frequently. Between Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 seems like their main travel. So maybe they, like, these are more their home world or like more their territory, right? And so yeah, it seems like they travel a lot. Seems pretty creepy to me. But so this case is more, you're more skeptical about this one than the other two that we've talked about.
Well, yeah, I mean, even with the past incident, I mean, I wasn't completely conclusive on it, but like something happened there. And like with this, we're basing it pretty much on a recollection from the two involved supposedly, and then, the psychiatrist, which you could just say these people are crazy and just come up with a story, and there really isn't a whole lot
Yeah,
there other than this star map and some unknown substance, which is already ridiculous to me. So yeah, there's just not enough here for me.
yeah. And then so um
It's a good
this,
story. If it was true, like that's insane. But
yeah. But the star map
I,
doesn't get you kind of thinking a little bit, like that some possibility of what they're saying is true.
no,
No, not at
I
all.
mean it's probably the least useful to me, to be honest.
Okay. Well, if anyone is more than willing to join, we'll take some calls, and we would like to hear some of the viewers on their take on this particular case. Or we're gonna wrap it up, and next week we'll be talking about the Travis Walton case, which is a very famous abduction story that happened in the late 70s. It has police reports, FBI report, lie detector test on the witnesses that were there. So we'll be discussing that. That might actually end up being a two-parter. Depends on how much information we get relayed during the time. But like always, like, that's the thing about this talk show. I'm more of a believer about these particular cases, but I do keep an open mind of that it could be something else. Like with this case, I take it as that they did see something that is unexplainable and that is unknown to us. But from Meyer's point of view, and let me know if I'm stepping on a little line. It could have been that they put false entities as human beings, treating Betty and Barney wrongly because of them being an interracial couple. So they went through, let's just say Betty was raped and mistreated. So she put her personal incident as saying that they were unknown people. Maybe she knew those people, right? And maybe Barney was treated the same way. You know what I mean? So maybe they were humans that were just shitty people that treated them horrible because they were an interracial couple. And they came up with this type of story of, not being, they rather, you know what I mean? But at the same time, coming out with the truth if that was the case. So Meyer, would you kind of say that that's kind of like where you're thinking that they kind of put this story as a way to cover up that they might have been abused by actual people because they were
I mean, it's
interracial?
it's
Or
more believable, but I'm not saying that's what happened either. I honestly think they're just crazy.
you think they're crazy?
There's just I don't want to say that because it just feels like shitty, but at the same time, there's just not enough evidence for me to be like, yeah, I
Yeah.
believe you.
Well,
But
I
if
think,
I heard the recordings and listen to all of that, like tone of voice is a big thing for me, so
yeah.
maybe my opinion would change.
And well, and the thing is that I will be posting on the channel later on that you can go back and listen to it, the
Yeah.
recordings. We just can't play the recordings because they ended up being copyrighted by the History Channel.
So I'll give them a listen, and then maybe next week I'll be like, you know what? I'm sold. Last week's
But
episode,
later on,
100%.
Meyer, So after the Travis Walton case that we discussed, we'll be discussing Project Blue Book that looked at this case. Travis looked at multiple cases, including this one, and what their initial report. So this one, you might end up changing your mind, depending.
And I hope so. I want to be a believer.
Because the Project Blue Book is a government-run project that looked into UFOs from 1952, I believe, all the way up to early 70s, and then was discontinued. You know,
was it classified? It was
and a lot of these were classified, and then under the Freedom Act, they started being published. And so one of the talk shows we will be discussing is Project Blue Book, on how the government conducted these cases and what their point of view was. You know, so you might have a different take. Well, alrighty, I think that will do it for tonight's episode. We didn't have any callers tonight. I wanted to see if Ordelis would want to come in and chime in. Hold on, let's see if we can pull him in, because he might have a different take on it. Hold on. Would you want to hear from Ordelis? Because it seems he's more on your end. I'm willing to. There we go. We'll pull him in.
Yeah, I'd be willing to hear.
Hey, how's it going, Ordelis? Ordelis? Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, man? So what'd you think overall about the Barney and Betty case that we've been discussing tonight?
I only caught like half of it, so I don't know if I really would have like enough information on it.
Well, what do you think about the star map from what she drew to what? Because that was like some of the questions that you had mainly was the star map, what she drew compared to what the astronomers have found over the years.
What I'm confused about is the frame of reference that she would have been presented, like if like based on what she drew, that frame of reference is away from us, and we don't have any. I'm trying to think how to say it. Like I don't think any of our satellites have made it that far yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hold up.
So I guess what I'm confused about is how are we building? Oh, did I turn my mic up?
No, I turned you up.
Okay. So I guess what I'm confused about is how are we building a map to match hers from the same reference point if we don't have any images
Well,
in that same direction?
From the telescopes.
Okay, but if Sol is our planet, that doesn't make sense then at all.
Yeah, our reference point is out from Sol. So we don't have anything from that side looking back in at Sol, I don't think. At least from that far.
Well, what they're when they were viewing it is if they were able to view the star map from our point of view, outward.
That's what he's saying, though. It's not from the perspective of Sol, though, if you look at the maps.
Well, yeah, this is the map that she drew, right? But when they were looking at the it's so pretty much when they were gauging her map, right, which is just a real illustrated of her map, which is this right here, they were viewing it from our side over, which was showing within the reference points. So so yeah, hold up, let me see, pull this up.
And the other thing that's throwing me off is these are all different constellations. Like the Mensae constellation and the Reticuli constellation and the, what is that, Gliese constellation? Like these are all, like these are very far apart from each other.
Yeah, but this is what yeah, but this is what she saw, and then this is the when they the astronomers I'm trying to find which astronomer ended up finding it out.
That's kind of reinforcing what I'm saying, though, is that you can draw lines connecting a bunch of different stuff. And if he's right and these are different constellations, that means they're super far apart.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Oh no, I'm not trying to disprove it. It's just that the frame of reference is just strange to me. That's all.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So I found out where. They sent. So in 1969, they sent this over to Trench Dickinson, which he started trying to reference the certain points more on what she's trying to draw, or like what she drew. And so he tried to focus on the positioning of where she was trying to position where they would have been, like where these like because Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 are the primary thing that they were trying to find at the time. Okay. And so they couldn't find those. So they tried to relay, from what I'm reading right here, they relayed Sol to 82. And then they started trying to picture, like trying to map out. And then they started going from there and picturing it out. So like they went from the closer ones, right? So like they were able to, when they were constructing the map, they were able to go from Sol to 82 to Tau Sinti to 107. So they were able to picture to end up guiding the map more on the left side, right? And so they were able to construct the left side of the map from our point of view, right? Not from their point of view, right? Of doing the left side of the map. And then by 1980s, they started getting Giselle 86, 86.1, 95, Kappa, Tau 1. So they started conducting more of the other side. And then in in 2009, they ended up taking what they found and going and finding Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 and to complete the star map. So they worked from the closest stars to the furthest one of the constellations and the night sky. So they worked on it from 1960. I pull it up. 1968 all the way from early 1990s. The European parallax collecting satellite missions measured the distance to more than 100,000 stars around the sun, more accurately than even before, showed some of the stars and the interpretation of the map. And then in 2009, they took the map and started being able to so they called it the G-type stars from the map, which are they're 3.3 light years away. And so once they were able to find the Zeta location, they were able to start placing the other ones with the correct coordinates. So it was like a study that's gone on for quite a long time from from what I'm reading right here as well. So it's something that they're, and I will be posting the astronomy article that goes in more detail, because there's a lot about this star map that I'm relaying. So I will be posting it in the Discord, but it seems like it wasn't just a simple, oh, they looked, they started with ours and they went more observing the closer ones and trying to figure out where they could position, like where these are located. So it was quite a long time of a study. So late 60s all the way up to 2009, 2011 when they wrapped it up. Which this star map is going to be something that also Ordell said will be discussed in next week's episode, because he drew a very similar take, but his star map is Zeta more to the right. So past Alpha. So like it's.
So you're telling me they spent all these years figuring that out, but they don't want to figure out the unknown substance?
Well, because it's easier to find, to look up in the stars. Remember, we know more about our space than we do about our own oceans. And so that's a pretty interesting thing. So, Ordell, like, what's your personal belief about UFOs or extraterrestrials?
Oh, that's a huge loaded question.
Well, like, are you more of a skeptic, or do you think that there's a possibility of life on other planets, or?
Okay. So I think that there is, without a doubt, somewhere out there, life of some kind. But when, like, in the terms that you mean, like, are there
Bacteria?
aliens? Well, no, I mean, no. I mean, I think absolutely there could even be intelligent life. But if you're asking it in terms of, like, is there intelligent life in the time frame that we also exist within the distance range that we could ever come into contact with them? I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, so
I
you're
mean,
you're more of you think that there's life on other planets, but that they can't be able to travel over.
I think either they came so far before us or so far after us that maybe, we're not going to exist at the same time, or we're so far apart that it's not going to matter.
Okay.
Because I think even Alpha Centauri is like 4 or 5 light years away or something like that. Like,
Well, Zeta is like 39.3 light years away, so that's far.
That's fucking super far. Like,
So
even if you were generous and gave them half the speed of light to travel, that's 60 fucking years one way.
yeah, unless they have like wormholes, they're able to produce their own wormhole.
I'm not sure I buy into traversable wormholes because you still have a singularity at the center.
Boom.
Well,
next topic: wormholes.
Well, no, it's like you could have wormhole is a theoretical, but you could look at it in two different ways. But yeah, we're like, that's just a whole other discussion. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think that there's a possibility that if there are intelligent beings that travel here, they're from much of an older part of the universe, and that can give them maybe a more capability of traveling to us that we don't fully understand today. But so you're more of a skeptic than anything.
I wouldn't call myself a skeptic. I'm just.
You need like more tangible proof than a leap of faith.
I don't know. It's just what little bit I know about science tells me that they're probably, if they exist, they're not going to be close to us.
Well, yeah, they could be from the older.
Really.
They could.
Yeah, basically.
They could be on the oldest parts of the universe, but maybe not have the capability to travel here within a matter of, not seconds, but.
Or there's just so much between us and them, I think, that to be able to even get here before visiting everywhere else first,
Yeah.
Like we'd probably go extinct just while they were traveling here.
Yeah. But remember, like, well, that's the thing that we'll be discussing later on with Project Blue Book is the age of nuclear activity was when there's been more sightings of UFOs stirred up. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking into as well. Is Project Blue Book covers a lot of that, of their investigations.
I am a fan of the alien origin theory, though.
Okay, so like what, that we came from aliens?
Yeah.
Kind of like Battlestar Galactica.
I don't know.
You never see? Well, Battlestar Galactica was pretty much like they came from a distance from 13 different colonies of planets, and they come to Earth, and they bred with the early primates of humans, and mixed with us. And so that's what happened in Battlestar Galactica. So that's the type of theory that you're discussing, or what ancient astronaut theorists come up with. You know what I mean? That aliens bred with us, gave us the knowledge, and then we're living through them, type of thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But overall, what do you think about this type of phenomenon talks that we were discussing?
I only know. I only caught the second half of this one.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that you're able to chime in about your thoughts. It was it definitely makes you like question a lot of what was occurring, especially and I'm giving you my takedown of the map. It's very hard to distinguish because a lot of this language, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm just going off of their simplified version of it, of how they, started from Seoul, went from 82. They built from the left side of the map downward. But I don't know what negative ZU3, so it'd be pretty interesting if we can end up getting a astronomer to talk about these type of things too and get them in here.
Help us.
I wish that we ended up having the people we were trying to get people that were friends with Barney and Betty and that heard these type of takes. We were trying to get that call, but they are not among us anymore, so that sucks. But Charlotte was trying to hook us up with that one. But some of the other cases I do have lined up that when we talk about further, we do have a psychiatrist that will come in and talk about ancient religious beliefs on that they might be from other planets. That'll be interesting later on in the line. So kind of like what you're talking about, Ordelis, of aliens coming here and populating us or whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, tonight was very interesting. It seems like Meyer Moore, you don't think that it happened. I think that I'm going off the faith of their testimony. Yeah, so this was a case that I guess it's pretty good that you have a different take than I do. So I felt like it was pretty good. It was good overall.
For now,
Yeah.
I might find out more information and make my opinion change.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we're going to end it there. Thank you guys for listening. Ordelis, thank you for calling in. And you guys have a wonderful night.
Bye.